It's true. What's up, everybody? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is that you're coming from, welcome. I'm really excited for this video. I was actually going to upload it further down the road in a couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer. But I figured I would do it now right after my newbie tag because it's another video that's kind of like an introductory one to me. So I figured I'll get this one out with the newbie tag because that's just more of me that you're going to learn about. So what I'm talking about in the video that I'm doing today is 25 bookish facts about me. So I'm going to just go over 25 facts. They're all going to be about me and related to books. I wrote all of these in one sitting while watching an episode of Hell's Kitchen. I've watched a couple of these videos. I'm not sure if I did it right. All of these facts, like I said, they're about me and about books, so I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. So I'm just going to jump right into it. And without further ado, here's 25 bookish facts about me. Number one, I have two book-related tattoos so far. The first one are my masks right here on my hand. This is actually from the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. It is very briefly mentioned in the first like 100 pages of this book. It's not even that big of a deal. It's just mentioned while explaining one of the characters. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what it means because I plan on doing further down the road when I get a few more, a tour of my book-related tattoos. Right now I only have two, but I have, I think, 6 more in the back of my mind that I plan on getting within the next year. So I'm not going to talk too much about them right now, but this has a really great backstory and is my favorite tattoo of mine. The second one is right here. This is Adara. So my boy George R. Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, if that's what you recognize it from, he actually wrote a couple books called Dream Songs. There's 2 volumes. This is volume 1, I believe. Yeah, this is volume 1. And in here, there's a short story called The Ice Dragon, 20 pages long. He says it has something to do with the Game of Thrones universe, but I don't think it does. It's very short. It's a kid's story, so it's not that like exciting. But in it is the Ice Dragon and Adara. Those are the 2 main characters. So it's published in this book right here, but he did actually have it illustrated and released, and it's as a single publication. So in that, the very final illustration, the picture at the very end of the book, is her right here, Adara, in a field. So what I plan on doing is having this tattoo, and I'm going to be getting the Ice Dragon going up here eventually. Number 2, I once left 5 boxes of books at an apartment when I was moving. So I moved to Toronto, brought all of my books there, was in this first apartment that I lived in for about 8 months, and when I was moving to my next one, I accidentally left about 5 boxes in my closet, and I am still to this day missing the books that were in there. I'm not 100% sure, but like there's ones that I don't have anymore that I had before that, so I'm assuming they were in the boxes. Like Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan, I really miss those books. Number 3, I met Pierce Brown. He is, if you don't know already, one of my top 2 favorite authors next to Brandon Sanderson, and he released Iron Gold, and I actually got to meet him. I had a book, I got it signed. I love it. But the best part about it is that I was one of the last people in line to go up and see him and get my book signed, and I had a question for him. I was like, yo, Pierce. He's like, yo, you, what's up? I'm like, I wanted to do this since I read your books, and if you've ever read Red Rising, you know that there's a group in there called the Howlers. Howler, like, oh! So I asked him if I could howl with him, and we did.
All right, hold on, we're going to play. 1, 2, 3. Oh! All right, got it.
It was amazing. Number 4, Brandon Sanderson, the author of some of my all-time favorite books and just this absolute genius when it comes to epic fantasy and magic systems, also does lectures on creative writing and actually taught a course at Brigham Young University. And there are 10-hour-long videos on the internet about his lecture. And so it's 10 hours long. I'm not even lying, I've watched those videos 3 times. I absolutely love them. He's teaching you how to write fantasy and science fiction. It goes through everything, world building, plots, all. They're all an hour long. There's 10 of them, and it's him delivering the lecture to the class. And I've watched those 3 times. They're amazing. Number 5. The only book that I have ever cried to while reading was A Little Life. All I'm going to say is that this book will ruin you and that it's amazing. Number 6, that's 2. Number 6, despite his popularity, I'm really not much of a fan of Stephen King. I don't really like his movies and I don't really like his books. I think the writing is incredible, and the guy's an absolute genius when it comes to pumping out books. But I find his stories start off really good for me, but then they just never deliver. The only book I've ever really read by Stephen King that I really liked was his book on writing, which is basically just a book on how to write and how he started to be a writer. And on that note, number 7, the worst book that I have ever read, Dreamcatcher by Stephen King. So I read this because I was at a hospital hours away from home in the waiting room because my grandma was going through surgery. I was there for hours and all I wanted to do was read. This is back in high school. I didn't have my book with me, so I went down to the gift shop and bought Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. The only reason I bought it is because Stephen King was a very recognizable name for me. Like, I knew who that was. I'd never read any of his stuff before, but I did know who he was, so I bought that book. Read about 300 pages and I couldn't do it. I tried so hard to finish it because that was in the peak of my I must finish the book, and it was just so bad. The idea was so cool in the opening pages. I was so excited for it, and then it just didn't deliver, and I was just very disappointed. Number 8, my 2 all-time favorite books in the world, To Kill a Mockingbird and Elantris, which I'm pretty sure is in those boxes. Honestly, To Kill a Mockingbird is my all-time favorite book, but I just find that it's such a go-to favorite for people that I don't like saying that it's my favorite. Elantris is definitely a number 2, very close, but I love them both. To Kill a Mockingbird, the reason I like it so much is because before I actually read this back in grade 9, I was only reading like Maze Runner, Hunger Games, stuff like that, Divergent. I hadn't really read anything that challenged my way of thinking, and that's what this did. This just opened up a whole new realm of literature for me, and I will always respect it. Plus, I just absolutely love the story. Harper Lee is a genius. Number 9, fantasy, epic fantasy, number 1 genre by far. Science fiction, close second, but fantasy is my favorite. I love the dragons, the magic, the elves, dwarves, that kind of stuff, the world, the cultures, the histories, everything. I am an absolute sucker for fantasy. Number 10, the only book that I have ever read in one sitting is The Storied Life by A.J. Fickery. So I actually bought this because of the cover. I absolutely love the cover. And I went to my dad's place. I remember that night. It was 10 o'clock. Everyone was going to bed. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to read a couple chapters of this book. And they were jokingly like, hey, what if we're going to see you there still in the morning reading it? I'm like, oh, you're crazy. I opened it, read the entire book, and then I closed it. All in one sitting. I was there until 3 in the morning. I absolutely loved it. I didn't even get up to go to the washroom. It was a fantastic book, and to this day is the only time I was ever able to sit and commit to an entire book in one sitting. Now, number 11 and 12 go hand in hand. So first, I find it very, very hard to read multiple books at once. I had a friend back in high school that could have 3 books open on her bed and will read a few pages, and then just juggle them back and forth. I have a really hard time doing that because I just get so invested in the characters that 1, it's like I don't want to stop reading about these ones, but 2, all the stories just get jumbled up in my mind, and I'm too confused already, and I just don't want to confuse myself anymore by reading a bunch of books at the exact same time. And then building off of that, number 12, I have a really hard time actually finishing a series. So even if it's just a trilogy, I'll read the first book, then I'll be like, ooh, something shiny, and then I'll start another one. I love the characters in the book I'm already reading. I love everything about it, the story, but then I hear about this other book, and then I get so intrigued by what that could offer that I'm like, all I can think about while I'm reading this series is how I want to start this one. So often I will take a break mid-series to start another one and then juggle back and forth. My next fact, although the Maze Runner books by James Dashner were amazing, it's the only time I've ever actually thought the movies were better. I know, usually books are always better than the movies, but I'm not going to ruin anything, but there was one aspect of the book that they did not include in the movies, and it was a huge part of the book. And every time I would read about it, I'm like, this just makes no sense. There's something about it that bugged me, and they completely removed it for all 3 of the movies, and for that reason alone, they were so much better than the books. James Dashner, I still love you. Those books were like it was like a defining series of my reading career, I guess. Absolutely love them, but the movies just were really good. Number 14, my dream as a child was to grow up and be an author. That is all I wanted to do. It was the coolest thing in the world. There is a graveyard of stories, arcs, of characters, of all these different ideas and worlds that I've built up over the years that I've never actually finished. My problem is that I would start one, create all the characters, everything that happens in that story, I'll start writing it, and then I'll get distracted by another idea. And I'm like, whoa, I really like this one, then I'll obsess over that. So one of these days, I'm hoping I will be able to actually finish a book because I still do it. It's still one of my favorite pastimes. And maybe I can get it published and someone can do a booktube review about it. Number 15, I am an absolute sucker for books that have maps. Epic fantasy in particular, I absolutely love it when it has a map because it just brings the whole world building to a whole new level. You can see the landscape, the mountains, all that kind of stuff, like the elevation of the land. And it brings everything to a whole new perspective when I'm reading that book because I can see the map and it's so incredible. I feel like it's a whole new level to the world that author has created. It's so beautiful. Number 16, I always judge books by their covers. I know they say not to do it, but show me one person that will look at a book and the first thing they think is like, oh, that looks really good. I want to read what it's about. Or what? That sounds horrible. I mean, aside from knowing who the author is or whatever, but if you look at a book and you see the cover, that's going to be like your very first impression. Number 17, before I actually started reading Goosebumps, I hated reading. We used to have to do it in class for silent reading, so I would start every single day with 20 minutes of reading any book in the classroom. I usually went to Berenstain Bears, and those were the worst 20 minutes of class until I saw my friend reading Beast from the East, until they brought home Goosebumps books, until I fell in love. But yeah, before I started reading Goosebumps and before I am where I am now, I absolutely hated reading. Number 18, the first Goosebumps book that I ever read, Stay Out of the Basement. Now, I actually used to have this on display in my shelf. It would be like right here, just by itself, all alone, and it was on display because that was the first book I ever read. That was what launched me on this journey to where I am now, and I have no idea what happened to it. It's such a bummer. One of these days I'll get it back, but that is the first book that I have ever read on my own. Number 19. I secretly enjoyed the Twilight books. I'm not gonna lie. I actually enjoyed them so much that my mom read them, told me to read them, and then I went out and I bought my own. Team Jacob. Number 20. Although the movies are my all-time favorite movies in the world, Lord of the Rings books by J.R.R. Tolkien did nothing for me. The movies are great. Peter Jackson did an absolute phenomenal job of bringing that world to the screen, but the books themselves did nothing for me. J.R.R. Tolkien, there's something about his writing. I actually don't like any of his books. The dialogue is almost too sing-song. The storytelling and the writing itself is almost like a little bit as if it's a poem, but a bad poem. So although his world building and his culture and his histories and everything about Middle-earth and what he created, I will always appreciate, I'll always love. He basically pioneered the genre that I am so in love with right now. It's just the actual stories themselves and the way that he writes and tells that story that I was never much of a fan. Number 21, my 3 all-time favorite book characters from anything. I can't even say books, but basically just 3 characters across TV, movies, anything, books. The Warded Man from The Warded Man by Peter V. Brett. Kaladin Stormblessed in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. And then my boy Darrow Orange-Dromedus from the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. Those 3, I'm going to be doing content about them specifically. I have ideas, but those are definitely the best 3 characters from anything ever, in my opinion. Number 22, my friends actually used to terrorize me by hiding my books. No matter where I went when I was younger, actually, you know what, to this day, I always have a book with me. Even if I'm not reading it, I always feel comforted by having a book nearby. So I would go over to my friend's place for sleepovers and bring my books, and they knew how much my books meant to me, so they would hide them. I'm not even lying, I would go into the fridge to grab milk, and I would see my book there. Because I already knew they were going to hide it. So they would hide it, they would terrorize me, we'd all forget about it, we would just spend the day doing our thing, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm going to go get a glass of milk, I'm going to go get some orange juice. And there is Game of Thrones 1 chilling out behind the eggs. Number 23, the most underrated young adult horror fantasy series and author, in my opinion, in the world, is The Demonata by Darren Shan. I actually have them right up here on my shelf. These books are incredible. They are gory, there is so much blood and death, and it is basically about the apocalypse coming around from demons from another universe and how these 3 people from different timelines that all come together and need to end the apocalypse. It is absolutely fantastic. It is a 10-book series, And although I will say like Bobby Pendragon and Percy Jackson and those books were really what Goosebumps, they're really what guided me through reading. The Demonata is it introduced me to a genre that I didn't even know existed in anything. This is when death became real for me in books, and when I actually was screaming out for the life of my favorite characters because they were surrounded by demonic werewolves. Like, I absolutely loved these books, and they never received the attention that I think they should have. Darren Shan is a master with a pen, and this series is absolutely fantastic. Number 24, the longest that I've ever spent in a bookstore was 3.5 hours. The city that I'm from doesn't have a big bookstore. We only have a small one. So every now and then, as a trip, my mom and I would drive 2.5 hours to a city that had giant chapters. Now, we would go there. For me, it was just for chapters. For my mom, there was a bunch of other stores that she wanted to go to. But I never cared about those stores. So what we would do is chapters would be our first stop. She would drop me off there. She would go and do all of her shopping. She would come back to the chapters, do her shopping there. And then she'd be like, hey, Cam, how much longer do you want? I'm like, 2 hours. She's like, you have 30 minutes. And I would just go around. I would look at books. I would read. I had the greatest time. It was like a playground for me. And I think the longest I was ever in one of those places was 3.5 hours. And that brings me to my final fact. Now, this is the one that I was avoiding because I'm scared to say it. Because every time I do, I feel like I'm about to get throat punched by somebody. And that fact is I've never read Harry Potter. I actually expected like lightning to come down and smite me on the spot. No, I've never read Harry Potter. I think I said it in my newbie tag from on Friday that I went into a store when I was younger, a bookstore, and I was talking to the gentleman there named Bruce and was like, hey, Bruce, I want to read a really good young adult series. What is there? He was like, Harry Potter. And I was like, okay, man, maybe. What about Bobby Pendragon? So it was literally Harry Potter or Bobby Pendragon, and I knew Harry Potter was very mainstream and everyone loved it, but I didn't know anything about Bobby Pendragon, so I went with Bobby. And to this day, I don't regret it. I read that, and then I never went back to Harry Potter. I plan on reading it eventually. I have the first 3 books. I just have no desire to. No, we're good. No, I just have no desire to, but I'm going to have to because I love reading books that people can connect to so much. And I know Harry Potter was to others what like Bobby Pendragon was to me. And I want to be able to talk to those people about the books that really changed their life and really guided them to where they are in their reading career. So I will eventually read them. But no, I've never read the Harry Potter books. And I've never actually watched all of the movies. I've watched some of them. I couldn't even tell you which ones I've seen. But enough about Harry Potter. That brings us to the end of this video. That is 25 bookish facts about me. I've watched a few of these videos. I'm not sure if I did it right. I mean, there's 25 facts. They're bookish and they're about me, so I don't know how much closer to the top I could have got with this one. But I do hope you enjoy it. I hope you know a little bit more about me. I'm going to start actually doing content now that's about book reviews and things like that, TBRs, all that kind of stuff. I just really wanted to get the newbie tag and the 25 bookish facts out of the way early so you can know a little bit more about me. On that note, I don't have an outro. I'm pretty sure me saying that I don't have an outro has just become my outro, so I'm going to go with that and say I don't have an outro. On that note, goodbye. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. Tell me my hair looks good. Any support, any interaction means the world and is very incredible. So thank you in advance, and I'll see you next time.